and today we have Nidra here, and welcome to another Training Tips Tuesday. If you haven't seen last week's video, we covered the name game and how to get your dog's attention, and so I'm going to be doing a refresher of that. It's always a good idea when you start a new training session to do a refresher of a behavior your dog already knows or a cue. And so we are going to be doing a refresher of the name game, and then we're going to be giving you some tips to teach sit. And so let's go ahead and get started. Right now I'm actually using some cat kibble as my treats because the cats didn't want to eat this, and so I got them fresh stuff, and I don't want the kibble to go to waste. So we are going to be using that as our treats today. And so the first tip, like I said, is to refresh whatever you were working on before. So it's always a good idea, even if you have a more advanced dog, to maybe do a little warm up with the name game just to get their attention. So we're going to do that now. And so right now she's kind of focusing on the bowl. So I'm just going to go, Nidra, yes. And then for her, if you watched last week's video, I did not use a reward marker for Marley all that much. For her, I am going to, because she is a little bit younger and she is still learning. She's farther along in her training than Marley, but she is still learning, so I want to mark and reward. And I don't think I've really played the name game too much with her, so that's why I'm doing the yes. You can also use a clicker to mark and reward as well. So, Nidra, yes, good girl. And so there she kind of glanced my way, but her eyes were still on the bowl. So I waited an extra second until her eyes were on me. And then I rewarded. Marked and reward. Nidra. Yes. Good girl. And also, as your dog gets more advanced, you're going to want them to hold their attention a little bit longer each time before you reward. And now I'm going to keep my hands out of the bowl so she's not anticipating that. Nidra. Yes, good girl. And then the reward will come after. Nidra. Yes, good girl. Nidra. Nidra. Nidra? Yes, good girl. And so there she was anticipating the reward. And that's something that trainers who use force might bring up, is they're just doing it for the reward, or they're focusing on the reward. And when you're first training a behavior, that is perfectly fine. You want to build the foundations before, in a positive way, before you kind of take it off. It's just like, especially like elementary school kids, you know, you make it, the learning process, a lot of fun, more game-like, and then as they advance into, you know, high school and college and such, it gets a little bit more serious. It's kind of the same concept with dogs. When you're first training, you want to keep it fun and positive, and you want to build those foundations in a fun way, and then you can get a little bit more serious as they progress down the line. So, Nidra, yes, good girl. Nidra, yes, good girl. Nidra. She also hears the other dogs out in the living room, so that's an added distraction for her. And like I said last week, they're not normally allowed in this room, and so that makes it a little different as well. Nidra, yes, good girl. And so even though she didn't give me her attention the first time, I didn't get frustrated. I just waited, and then I repeated my cue. Nidra, yes, good girl. Nidra, yes, good girl. Yes, good girl. And so there she offered the behavior. And especially when it comes to their attention, if they offer it, it's a good idea to mark and reward even in that instance. as they get farther along, sometimes they can kind of anticipate, and she's really bad about that, like with sitting down and such. And so in those instances, you kind of want them to listen and wait for the cue. But when they're offering you their attention, or throughout the day, if they're offering you behaviors you like, make sure you mark and reward those behaviors. Yes, good girl. Yes, good girl. Yes, good girl. Alright, so she's offering her attention a little bit more, so we'll go ahead and move on to sit. So the first thing, normally when you're first teaching sit, she already knows it, so I can't fully show you the process, but I'm going to do my best to break it down. But when you're first teaching sit, especially with little dogs, it's kind of good to get on their level, and that way you're not looming over them, luring them into a sit. That can be kind of scary. And same thing for a fearful dog. So like with Marley, when I first taught him sit, he learned using the other dogs. And then when we kind of worked more one-on-one, he already kind of knew the cue just from hearing the cue and then performing it with the other dogs, like when I would give them treats or when I want them to sit to go outside, things like that. So you already kind of had that foundation just by being around the other dogs. But say you have a fearful dog and you don't have other dogs to use that option, you wouldn't want to be looming over them to lure them into a sit, so you kind of want to get on their level. So I'm actually going to have her stand. Stand. Yes, good girl. Good girl. And so, like I said, I like to get down on their level, and then you can progress. And the bigger dog, obviously, it's a little easier to teach them to sit while you're in a stand. And you can even sit, you don't have to get fully on the ground, you can sit in a chair or on the couch, something like that. And then you would progress, to standing up. So, I'm just trying to get her in a stand so I can show you guys what I want. And so when you're first teaching, you're going to go from their nose and you're going to go up. And you see as you go up, their haunches come down. Stand. Yes, good girl. You're not going to go straight up like this. It works for her, but some dogs would actually come forward and follow it. And so you don't want to go straight up. You want to keep it into their nose. Come here. Keep turning. There you go. You want to keep it into their nose and move up with them. And if you do have a scared dog or a dog that's not quite getting it, it's okay and it's encouraged to break it into pieces. So you might start with, just lifting their head up. And as they follow the treat and lift their head up, because especially for like a fearful dog, it might be too much for them to go into a full sit. So just following the treat and lifting their head up is an important step. And then as they get comfortable with that, then you would move on and you would want to just see a slight crunching. So that step back and kind of down, you would want to see that. And of course she goes all the way down, but she knows what I want. Come here, sit. And so just that slight backward movement, you would progress to that. And then you would ask for a little bit more, so kind of a bend in the haunches. You would ask for that. Yes, good girl. And so even if they don't get their butt all the way down like she did, if they're just kind of bending it, you would mark and reward that. And then you would progress into a full sit. And then once they're doing the behavior or the cue that you want, so going from a stand to a sit, you would add in the cue word. And it's really important when you're teaching them, you don't say the cue and do the hand signal at the same time, because it weakens your verbal cue. Dogs actually tend to do better with hand signals. I'm sure there's some dogs out there that are more verbal, but you want the verbal cue to precede the hand signal, and that way they will learn that better. And so when I'm going to do it, can you stand? I'll say sit. And she already knows it. She laid down though, which is something, she's kind of a lazy dog. And so oftentimes she wants to just lay down and chill. And so I'm not going to reward that for her. Just because I really want her to listen to the cue I'm giving her. So stand. So then I'm going to again. Just get her in a stand. Sit. Nope. Sit. Yes. Good girl. Good girl. And so I said sit. She already knows the cue. So she sat. I mean, like I said, a lot of times she sinks into a down. But she did sit. And so if she hadn't sit after the verbal cue, we already taught the word. So if she hadn't sat after the verbal cue, I would say sit. And then I would give her the hand signal or the lure into position. And then yes, and reward. But you want to say sit and have a little bit of a pause. So that way they're hearing that word separate from the lure. Otherwise, we talk so much, it's just kind of meaningless jumble. So you really want the word to have that association with whatever they're doing next. And so as long as it's always preceding your lure, they're going to learn that cue word. Sit. Yes, good girl. Sit. Yes, good girl. 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 Sit. Good girl. Yes. Sit. No. And sit from a down as you get more advanced. Sit from a down is very different from sit from a stand. Dogs do not generalize well, and so it's a different action for them, and so it's not the same behavior or cue for them as we think it is. Because when we think of sit, we think of the position they're in, and we feed for that position. But for dogs, it's the action of going into the sit that they learn. So they learn from the stand, they sink their butt down, and they're in that position. We're down. We're going from a down to a sit is of different actions. So down, yes, good girl. And so when I say sit, it doesn't mean the same thing. So you see she knows the cue word sit when she's in a stand. But now that she's in a down, she didn't do anything. And so I would do it again, sit, and then I would lure her up. Yes, good girl. Yes, good girl. Sit. Yes, good girl. Down. Sit. And we have worked on sit from a down in the past, just not very much, and so she doesn't know it as well. Sit. Yes, good girl. Stand. Yes, good girl. Sit. Yes, good girl. Down. And there she got a little distracted and she didn't do the cue. Don't get angry. Down. And so she didn't respond again, so I'm going to break it up. Come here. Yes. Yes. Down. There we go. Good girl. And so instead of just repeating the word, because if you just repeat, and that's a mistake a lot of people make, is like with sit, they take their dog to the vet or out and the dog doesn't, they think the dog knows the cue, but their dog doesn't generalize it to other locations or anything like that, and so they just repeat it over and over, sit, 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 and that weakens the cue because that cue then no longer has an action associated with it. It's just a meaningless jumble, and so you really want to make sure you say it distinctly and separate. So sit, yes, good girl. Down, down, down. Yes, good girl. And she's still young, she's an adolescent, and so her attention span gets off, and you really do want to keep sessions short. And this is starting to get a little bit long, and so I'm probably going to end it here. I just want to cover one last thing. If your dog does not know sit, and for some reason you need them to, like a lot of times working in the veterinary clinic, we would need them in that position, but they didn't necessarily know the cue. You never want to, can you stand? Come here. You never want to push on a dog's rump to get them into a down. And so if you need to, can you stand? Come here. So if you need to and you have them in a stand, good girl, you would never push on their rump to get them into a down. You would never want to push on their rump and push them into a down. That's not good for their spinal cord. Instead, can you stand up, please? She's like, I don't know what you're doing. Instead, you would guide them. So you would put your arm under their haunches. It's okay, Ninis. It's okay. And then guide them down like that. Even a big dog, it's really easy. You know, one arm around the neck, the other around their haunches. And to kind of lift up and tuck them under into a down. You never want to force them into a down. That's not good for their back. And also, if you're training and you try to force them into a down, they're not learning it the same as luring them or capturing it. They might eventually learn it, but they don't learn it as well as them performing the action themselves because you're forcing them into a position. So that's really important as well. But we are going to end it there. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please give it a like. And don't forget, if you haven't already, to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification so you are notified when I do upload videos. Right now my videos are Training Tips Tuesday, and so every Tuesday I'll be uploading a video, but I might do some bonus videos in between, so you definitely want to have that bell notification on so you are notified. And that's it for today. We'll see you next week. Have a good one, guys. Bye. Down. Nidra. Down. Good girl. Sit. Yes, good girl. Down. Nidra. Down. Yes, good girl. Sit. Yes, good girl. Down. Yes, good girl. Sit. Yes, there you go. Down. Yes. Sit. Yes, good girl. Stand. No, that's not what I said. Stand. Nidra. Stand. Yes, good girl. Stand. Yes, good girl. Stand. Yes, good girl. Stand. Yes, good girl. Oops. Down. Yes, good girl. girl. Sit. Yes, good girl. Stand. Yes. Sit. Yes, good girl. Down. Nidra, down. Down. Nidra. Down. Yes, good girl. Sit. There you go. Stand. Yes, good girl. Sit. Yes, good girl. Down. Nidra. Yes. Down. Down. Yes, there you go. Leave it. No, leave it. Good girl. Down. Yes, good girl. Good girl. Sit. Yes, there you go. Stand. Yes. Right here. Good girl. Down. Down. Yes. There you go. Stand. Yes, there you go. Stand. Stand. Oops. Stand. No. Stand. Stand. Stand.